thanks ever so much for coming with me, because I'd never found the directions on my own. I'm absolutely useless at navigating. So.
I've realised that already, Andrew.
Yeah.
And it's all right. I'm just here to take you off the straight and narrow.
It's a good job I'm not a leader or anything like that, isn't it, really?
Yeah. We all need a little help.
So last night, Candida, I was reading this book, right, called Ancient Christian Martyrdom. You might possibly have heard of it.
Yeah, once or twice. It could be because I wrote it.
It's yours, is it? It's very good. Very good. I enjoyed it. You're not a fan of martyrdom, really, are you?
Oh, that's not fair. I know everyone says that, but I actually am a big fan of martyrdom, and I'd argue that actually the message of the New Testament is that you do have to die as a martyr if the situation arises. All of that language about taking up your cross and following me, I think Jesus really means that. What I'm not a huge fan of is this kind of misconception that some modern Christians have, which that is that in the early church in particular, Christians were constantly dying as martyrs. There were martyrs, but it didn't happen all the time.
Right, okay. So persecution that I learned about in early church history all those years ago kind of thing, was that less of a thing than they told me?
It was much less of a thing. If what you mean by persecution is that you have a government, you have legal authorities who are deliberately targeting Christians, they want to get Christians either to apostatize or they want to execute them. If you're talking about that, then we're talking about maybe 12 years in the first 300 or so years of the Christian era. And that's nothing like what I learned in catechism and at Sunday school.
Now, 12 out of 300 isn't bad, really. You could sort of cope with that. It's a fair deal in some ways.
Yeah, it's not good. I'm not saying persecution is ever good, but it's not what we were sort of led to believe, that from the very early days, from the apostles hiding in the upper room, that then they were sort of relocated to the catacombs and couldn't come out of hiding until the Emperor Constantine.
So is martyrdom ever good, then?
What do you mean? Like, is it good to die as a martyr for you? Or?
Well, I mean, I'm not volunteering, I'm not like suggesting that this would be something we could try now. But was it a good thing to be a martyr? Did people get respected for it? Or?
Absolutely. People would remember you. I mean, Roman Catholics and Orthodox Christians and the Church of England, they remember martyred saints from the early church to this day. And a lot of people who lived in the early church thought that if you died as a martyr, you got special rewards. So, for example, you didn't have to wait until Judgment Day to be resurrected from the dead. You could go straight to heaven when you died, and you wouldn't be judged. All your sins were forgiven, and you'd get a special crown and a palm branch signifying that you were a martyr, and maybe even, according to Revelation, a seat on the throne of God.
Wow. Well, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? So, is that a little bit like Muslims believe in terms of what happens to them if they kind of kill themselves as part of jihad or something like that? Is it similar stuff?
Well, there are obviously some significant differences between Islamic martyrs and Christian martyrs, and I'm not a specialist in Islam, so I tread here lightly. But I guess what I would say is, if you think that Christian martyrs are always peaceful, that they never attack other people before their death, that they're essentially passive pacifists, and that they don't think they're getting something out of it, then you just don't know the history of Christian martyrdom, because there were Christian martyrs who were violent, and there were Christian martyrs who volunteered.
So both of those sound a bit weird. For starters, the fact that you'd be a violent martyr is a bit strange. That just strikes me as a bit freaky, really. And but also the thought that you'd volunteer for it. So...
Okay, so let's start with the violence.
Yeah.
So we know, for example, that Christian authorities have to crack down on this, because after the era of martyrdom, Christians would go to pagan temples and they would try to tear them down in the hopes of dying as martyrs in the process. And that does sound strange to us. Why would you go and attack some innocent pagans? How could you possibly think this is a Christian thing to do? But the passage that they were reading in the Gospels was the cleansing of the temple incident. And they understood Jesus overturning the tables of the money changers as sort of something that they should pattern their behavior after. And so they would go and they would destroy pagan temples.
Wow.
Do I personally think that's a good thing to do? Absolutely not. But you can see why they thought that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I can get that. So, why then do you think they might focus so much on dying and making sure you die the right kind of death rather than living the right kind of life if they're trying to follow Jesus in all of this?
Well, I mean, dying is a really critical part of Jesus' mission. I think a lot of us think maybe we wouldn't have salvation if it hadn't happened.
Okay.
I do take your point, and there are some early Christians who also thought that. They thought, yes, martyrdom is good, but really, to be like a real Christian, a true Christian, surely you have to live a life of virtue, a life of obedience to God, a life of helping others. Surely it can't be just about dying well. And so you do get some pushback against that idea. And I think certainly for Christians today, very few of whom we hope will have the opportunity to die as martyrs, the focus has to be on the here and now.
Cool. I've run out of questions.
We're all done with martyrdom. Wrap that up.
I think that's good. That was
We're
all
not
right.
at Cadbury World yet.
No, we're nearly at Cadbury World. It's not far away. And maybe if you'd given me directions like you're supposed to, it would have been there already.
I mean, if you keep going, it's quite trafficky.